Can't show the label though. Because it is, let's call it pomegranate juice. Going back to old school. I got stuff on me from working outside. I was slaying the sprinklers today. Whenever you get past the winter, during the winter, obviously we don't have our automatic sprinklers on because it's raining and you don't, why waste the water? But whenever it comes time, okay, starting to get hot, like it was 90 today, 90 something today. Whenever it gets hot and you got to start turning the sprinklers on, invariably in our backyard, we got to go through and, test all the different stations and then solve all the problems that are associated with all the stations. And in this case, it meant a lot of different things, I had to replace the solenoid. There's some that got, their heads chopped off by lawnmowers, some that are aimed incorrectly, some that have been broken because our dogs, when they do crazy dog, they chase each other around and, wrestle and do all that stuff. They don't care what they hit. It's all part of the fun and games. Some of them, if they haven't been used for a long time, they don't want to pop up. They're like, nah, I've been down here for like 3 or 4 or 5 months or whatever. Now we're not working anymore. So all that stuff. But you just got to go through one station at a time, one thing at a time, and make it all work. So we are all doing good. I got a lot of comments before we get to our roller rocker stuff. Got a lot of comments on interesting ones on the tariff stuff that we did the other day. That was good. I like bringing stuff like this up. It's interesting. I love hearing all of the, different points of views and opinions and all of that stuff where people say certain things. It's awesome. That's part of the commenting process is very, very good. But today we want to talk about roller rockers. I get a lot of questions on that stuff on all the different engine families. Make sure to hydrate, and I highly recommend pomegranate juice because it's good for you. And on the roller rockers, like everything else that we have talked about in the world, there's no universal thing. There's no, yes, always roller rockers. there's not also no, never roller rockers. There's in between. There's the gray area, just like everything else. Yeah, big cams, stuff from China, stuff from the United States, all the things that we talked about. But when it comes to roller rockers, there are lots of engine families where I recommend them almost all the time. Small block Ford, small block Chevy, big block Ford, big block Chevy, Dodge, on all of the earlier motors, I recommend those highly on every application. Whenever we would put motors together and run them, and even if we would do that in, successive steps where I'd go on the dyno and we'd go, okay, now we're going to run all the normal things. We're going to do a cam, we're going to do ported heads, we're going to do rockers, we'll do an intake manifold, we'll do headers, whatever all the things are going to test. Rockers is one of those things, because it's not that stock rockers don't work. It's just that on all of these earlier motors, they're all like a stamped steel slider rocker almost always. And they're not a good design to begin with. They're good for a production motor and they're inexpensive. Which is why the OEMs like them. They work well for the kinds of cams that you run when they're stock, meaning that the amount of lift that you can get away with, the amount that they will articulate for a given lift value. All of that stuff works well, but their slider mechanism in the middle, the fulcrum part, lots of friction there. And we see, like with the modern LS deal, we have a rocker assembly or we have a roller fulcrum assembly, at least. Now, it doesn't have a roller tip, but I think of the two of those things, if you look at an LS, if we were talking about if you had to choose between those two. Now, an aftermarket roller rocker has a roller fulcrum and a roller tip. That's a good situation. That, it has you have both of those areas where you're trying to reduce friction. If you had to choose one of those, you would definitely choose the fulcrum. I mean, that would be way more important in terms of friction than the tip is. And then I would argue that the tip becomes a roller tip anyway. It becomes more and more important for higher lift things, particularly on an LS, when you're not wanting to, side load the valve. So it becomes more and more important. But when you're choosing these things, there are some important things that you need to understand when you're talking about rockers. So the first thing is, are you just going, like, if it's a small block Chevy or small block Ford, big block Chevy, big block Ford, Dodge, whatever. I don't want to not show love to the Dodge guys. But when you're talking about those, you're talking about two things really. One is that it's going to be a roller rocker, and like I said, it's going to have a roller fulcrum, it's going to have a roller tip. But also, you would almost in every situation, although there are actually lots of guys that would put roller rockers. I remember back in the 5-liter Ford days that you would put roller rockers on that were the same ratio. So you'd use a 1.6. You could also go to a 1.7. You could also step up, because when you go to a change in ratio, you get essentially a small change, like a small change in camshaft. Basically, you're adding lift, and then you're adding a little bit of duration. So the gains that you would get from roller rockers come from not just the frictional change, but also from some change in cam timing, lift, and a little bit of duration. So you'd be more apt to pick up power by doing that, by changing the ratio. So on a Ford, small block Ford, 1.6 to 1.7, small block Chevy, 1.5 to 1.6, an LS, 1.7 to anything from 1.72 to 1.8 or 1.85. You can go pretty big. And if you look at the 3800 V6, you could go to a 1.900, the guys at ZZP, which is the kind of rockers I think I'm going to try on the Big Bang one. So you can do a big ratio change, and you can get the roller portion of it to have it work better. And that way you can get more of a gain. It's definitely beneficial. But when you do that, before we jump into the LS stuff, but before you do that, it's important to understand that when you do a rocker change, just like if you do a camshaft change, so if you do a camshaft change and you go from a 450 lift cam to a 500 lift cam or a 550 lift cam, or even more, you obviously have to change the valve springs. So when you do a cam upgrade, almost always, unless you get an NSR cam, you're going to have to change the valve springs. One, for the lift. So if you have a 550 lift cam, you need springs that won't coil bind, and also where the retainer is not going to hit the seal, so you won't have any binding issues with the spring at that lift. The other thing that you need it for is when you put a camshaft in it that's not a stock cam, usually that has more duration. We go from a 190 cam to a 200 or 210, 220, 230, whatever kind of duration you're talking about. It's going to want to run more RPM. So in addition to the lift, which we have to have, coil bind clearance for, you're also going to run more spring rate. We're talking about fairly simple things on the spring. Actually, the spring frequency is going to come into play here too. And this is particularly the case for very, very high RPM stuff. Oh, I want to run, how can I run an 8,000 RPM LS? Well, you can get a really, really stable cam profile, and you can get valve springs that are not just the right valve springs. So lots of guys think that, I just put a sloppy stage 2 in there, and I'll just put a pack spring in there, and then I got an 8,000 RPM motor. No, you don't. Because if you've ever watched those kinds of things, if you ever watched what happens on like a Spintron, where you see, and I'm not going to call out the sloppy stage 2, but if you have an unstable cam profile and you've watched it on a Spintron, and you can see you have and it has instability, that's normally not something you can cure with more spring rate. It has to be cured with the right spring rate. Or changes in other things. You could change things in the rocker design. You could change things in the rocker weight and ratio. You could change things in the valve mass. You could put a lighter weight valve, and you could change lots of things that change not just weight when we're talking about it, but also change the frequency of things that are going on. And that's very, very important. So it's important for you to match all of that stuff, particularly if you're running high RPM. If you're talking about the things that we normally talk about, 6,500 or 7,000, let's say, particularly on small block Chevys or small block Fords, big block Chevys, big block Fords, those kinds of things. Normally, you get away with going with that kind of camshaft and a rocker deal. You're going to put more spring rate in it, and you're going to put, again, the spring rate is for the added lift and then also the added RPM potential that you're talking about. So for, like I said, for a street trip kind of thing, 6,500, 7,000. Those are all reasonable amounts that you can upgrade to, and you can get away with that fairly easy with, lots of spring combinations that guys have that are readily available. You don't have to science all that stuff out. On the LS side, it's a little bit different because you're going through all that. You're looking at, okay, if I'm doing let's say I want to do roller rockers on an LS. The question becomes, are you doing that in lieu of a camshaft? So are you using a stock cam and then just doing a rocker upgrade to a roller? In this case, it would just be a roller tip because the factory one already has a roller fulcrum. And then are you doing that with, which camshaft are you doing that with? Are you doing that with a stock, LM7 or LR4 like truck cam? Are you doing it with an LS1 cam, an LS2, 3, 6, 9, 7 camshaft? Which one are you doing that with? And we've shown, and I have lots of videos up where we've shown this on rockers on the LS, and I have lots of rocker stuff on small block Fords and Chevys and big blocks and all that stuff. But whenever we do that, you obviously have to do a spring upgrade. And it's the same thing with an LS. If you put roller rockers on, depending on which ones, well, all of them are going to require more spring rate than stock. You're not going to be able to get away with putting roller rockers on a stock spring and have it work very well. Even if you upgrade, let's say you have a set of 706 heads, which have stock springs on, like 500 lift springs, and you go to the 550 lift springs, like an LS6 or an LS3, that will help. And then you do a rocker upgrade, you're like, okay, I'm good. I put the other springs on. I did the rocker upgrade. That's probably not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough to control the valve float issue. At least it hasn't been in my testing. You've created valve train problems that are not cured by an inexpensive spring upgrade. You're almost always going to have to go with some kind of dual spring. And that brings us to the other end of stuff. And that's like, okay, I've put a camshaft in, put some sort of aftermarket camshaft in. I put a low buck truck camshaft in, put a truck plus camshaft, a BTR stage 4 LS3 cam or Texas Speed or whoever's camshaft you put in. I put a camshaft in. Now, can I also put roller rockers on it? Usually I would say yes is the answer there, because when you've cured the problem of running more camshaft, both the lift and the duration and the RPM potential, when you've cured that with springs, and then you add rockers to the equation, you have a whole bunch extra spring that allows more camshaft, more lift and duration and stuff, that allows more of that. And so when we've done rocker upgrades, after we've already done a spring upgrade, like we've put BTR 660 platinum springs on or 650 of those springs, usually after we've done that kind of spring upgrade, now, like I said, it's not going to work with a factory 550 lift like LS6 spring or LS3 spring. But once you've done a really good quality dual spring, like the BTR platinum stuff, that level of stuff, and we've done rocker upgrades after that, we've not run into problems. Now, I've never tried to run a roller tip or roller rocker at very high RPM, not on an LS. We've done a lot on big blocks and small blocks and that kind of thing. We had roller rockers on the 8,000 RPM small block Ford that we did, and not even a shaft rocker, which we probably should have had. And I didn't even have a stud girdle on it, which I probably should have had, but we didn't do that. Running a 1 run or 2 run or 5 run or whatever dyno pull, it's not the same as running it in a guy that was running an 8,000 RPM small block Chevy is going to have, shaft rockers. He's going to have the right setup on there. But once we've done the spring upgrade, usually the rocker test is okay. And when we've not tried to do that, like when we've done LS stuff, when we've done rocker upgrades on them without the spring rate, it's just valve float city. I mean, and I've cursed myself many times and run into that issue. We've also run into that issue with camshafts too. We've put camshafts in and we've like, oh, okay, look, it's it's collapsing on itself at 5,800 RPM or 6,100 RPM. I ran through that. I ran into that a lot, going through all of those different cylinder heads in the small block Ford test that I did. When we're running all those heads, almost all of those, the springs on almost all of those heads had to be changed because there wasn't enough spring rate. And we weren't even running like gigantic cams. We were running either the 274 comp cam in that case, or a slightly smaller one, especially on the 306 and the I think it was a 347. Those are fairly small camshafts. But the spring rates that they had on those and we got heads, we told them, like, this is a hydraulic roller motor. This is what 5 liters are. It should be no problem. But these guys had issues with, and again, it's a combination in the extreme energy deal on that small block Ford. It's the extreme energy profile plus roller rockers. And then that's why in most cases we didn't have enough spring rate. So if you're doing roller rockers on any of these applications, you're going to need the right spring. Frosty cold beverage. Let's see what guys got going on. Untrue Jet Ben, what's going on? Lunchbox. Totally unrelated question. Ever seen dowel pins shear off from the flywheel and an otherwise normal clutch? So you broke the dowels from the flywheel that align the clutch up? Did you get a bunch of chatter or something? I've seen that happen. Getaway, what's going on? Winston, greetings, everybody. Hello. Can you do a video on how to set and install rockers? I've seen your cam video, and you have the factory rockers. I know there's a ton, but personally would like to see how you install on an LS. How we install aftermarket roller rockers. I try to dissuade everybody from changing rockers on an LS so much that I haven't done that. Although I have shown in the rocker videos how to install them. The problem with it is that it depends on how the adjustability of the rocker is, whether it's a bolt down rocker. The smaller Fords obviously have those, and they have adjustable rockers too. So it depends on which ones we would be looking at, and it would be specific to that kind of rocker. I picked up 24 horsepower going from a roller tip to a double roller rocker. I can't believe it. So that was going from like a Magnum roller tip rocker to a real like roller rocker. Mike, what's going on? Crower Enduro stainless steel pedestal roller rockers are my favorite. Those got to be heavy, being a stainless. I know that the comp stuff that we ran that was stainless required quite a bit of spring rate. They want a lot, costing you $1,000 or $1,100. That's a lot. I thought about it as well for an stock LS. The old 302s, you just add a roller rocker, no spring or push rod change, made power. You can't just add roller rockers to stock spring 302s. At least that hasn't been my experience. We always ran into valve float. LS seems to need to change the whole valve train, even with a stock camshaft. TSP, I think, suggested push rod change on their 172 roller tips. Valve float is a concern. Yeah, the push rod change would come from the way that the rocker bolts on, and it's not unusual. And we saw this on big block Chevys too, going from one style roller rocker, one manufacturer, to another style manufacturer roller rocker on the same motor with the same ratio required a different push rod length. Thought about doing a roller rocker on a truck motor with an Elm 7 cam, but I haven't found the upgrade worth it as past engines. Yeah, I would not recommend that. What springs do you recommend for the Truck Norris cam 62 L94? BTR has a spring kit for those, and we sell that for that Truck Norris cam. They have a 560 lift beehive spring. Dustin, what's going on? What RPM would we see valve float on an LS with Harlan Sharp? I don't know. With Harlan Sharp roller rockers. See, I don't know what 600 springs mean. I don't know what spring that is. I don't know what the spring rate is. I don't know what the frequency is. I don't know any of that. And the 228, 230 cam sounds like a sloppy stage 2. I've seen no star washers on flywheels and hit the web of the block. I'm using Yellow Terra 17s, aluminum shaft rockers with a beehive spring and a Truck Norris on my 6-liter. You don't have any valve float issues up to 7,000. Must be a really big beehive. Or rockers had valve float issues that needed dual springs. The rockers that we tried in the rocker video were comps. But I'm sure that you don't have, Jesse, I'm sure you don't have an LS6 or an LS3 valve spring like a stock one. You have to have some aftermarket beehive spring. I have a small block Ford 236 cam that fell off at 5,800. What springs you recommend? Yeah, that's definitely going to be a valve spring deal. They should have a spring. Comp should have a spring recommendation for that. You're going to need a spring for that cam that's like 150 plus on the seat, and we like 200 and 400 for that cam, but somewhere above 150 and somewhere above 375, let's say, open. So let's say for that cam at 600 lift. And on the dyno, especially with an air hat on it, it's really easy to find valve float. And sometimes it will rev through, which is weird. It will rev through the valve float like it's a frequency problem. So the power will drop and then sometimes it comes back up. We don't like revving it past that situation because it gets really unhappy. Got any shaft rockers laying around for a small block Ford? Victor head. Yeah, no, that's pretty specific. You're running a hydraulic roller on that? Okay. I'm assuming that those Victor heads are heavily ported. They probably would be. Get away! What's going on? Yes. Poor Bruno and Brady. They were outside with us all day. They were working on the sprinklers and stuff, and they're like, usually we're like 3 naps in by now, so they're tired. What's the highest seat pressure and open pressure you have tried, Richard, on a stock old school stamp rocker and late model LS? I don't know about. We would never try like excessive pressure on a stock stamped rocker. I don't think. I don't ever remember building any kind of. That sounds like a class specific like application. And if we did that, it probably, if we were using stamp steel rockers for a class specific deal like that, I think it would probably be like a solid flat tappet cam, which doesn't require a lot of a spring rate because it doesn't have a lot of lifter weight. Stock old school stamp rockers and late model LS. We've run lots of spring pressure on stock LS rockers though, because they work great. We ran stock LS rockers, stock high mileage rockers on the 8,000 RPM deal. Full cam and spring kit from BTR. And Jesse, what was your deal here? Oh yeah, you had the spring deal. Okay. Scrolling. Have you heard of Jim Miller and his mid-lift rockers? How much cam translation do the big companies actually lose versus precise angle and getting the cam information to the valve? So what you're talking about is measuring the whole lift range and calculating what the valve is actually doing relative to what the rocker says that it's doing. No, I get that. But it's not like, I mean, the way that you make it sound that the rocker companies are like trying to get one over on people. And I don't think that that's the case. Turbo 400, after making some hard pulls on the highway, RPM starts to rise without gripping until I give it some throttle, goes a second, then for third again, and we'll repeat. Testing my new radiator cap. I broke the last one. Driving without a hood. Do you have heating issues driving without the hood? I've done 130 pounds of seat and 340 pounds open on a stock Ram Air 4, 165 stomp rocker. Nothing broke. Yeah, I don't think you would break the rocker, but I think if you measure deflection like on a valve train, I think you'd start to see things happen with a stamped steel rocker. And even if you didn't get deflection on the stamped steel rocker, you can't get away from the frictional loss though. They definitely flex. Stamp rockers lose 20 thousandths lifts measured at the valve. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me that they're doing that. I remember even, I think Brule they were doing a test. It might have been with Jeff Smith because he does lots of cool stuff like this. I think that they were measuring like static deflection, just not even while the thing is running, which you definitely will see stuff when it's running that you don't see in a static test. But they did static tests based on really high spring rate, like race roller stuff. And you could measure a lot of deflection just rotating the motor. It was quite a bit. Scrolling. Keep hydrated, scrolling. With purpose. Purposeful. Are thicker push rods always better? No, I don't think that they are. I think you need what you need. Like I did a rocker test before because I did it with the guys from Trend. We had 5/16 rockers, which a lot of race guys go with 3/8 push rods, and a lot of big block guys go with 7/16 push rods or even 7/16, and then they do like heavy wall stuff. I did a test where we did 5/16 push rods on an LS, and then we did 80 wall and we did 105 wall, and we didn't do 135 or 150 or whatever I don't know if they have at a 5/16 push rod. But it surprises me that guys with what I think are fairly mild spring rates, because I think spring rate should dictate what's going on with the push rod. I think some of the big block Chevys and B&R might know this. I think some of the big block Chevys, some of the factory ones came with 7/16 push rods. And they did that with solid flat tappet camshafts. And they did that with really what I would think would be fairly mild spring rates, which I think is ridiculous. I don't think there's any benefit to that at all. I don't think you, now I don't know what they were doing on their 3/8 push rods. And I know a lot of big blocks, a lot of Gen 6 stuff come with 5/16 push rods. I don't think you lose anything as long as you're not having a bunch of deflection. And we didn't have any in the LS going from an 80 wall to a 105 wall in the Trend push rod test that we did. Now I didn't run it on a Spintron, which would be cool to see, but there was no change in the power. The power repeated within 1 horsepower. So it's not, there was nothing there. And a lot of guys will swear by, oh yeah, you got to have this big push rod. I'm like, yeah, but if you go with that push rod, you've got to remachine everything. You got to completely change your cylinder head to do that. And are you gaining anything from that? Check out the vacuum modulator can on the Turbo 400. What are roller walkers worth of horsepower gains on small block Ford? Honestly, I think it depends on all of the rest of the stuff. But 10 or 15 is not unusual. We agree with your 408 device. Does higher roller rocker help with great heads? I don't know that that's the case. I like to try to get my my lift from the cam and not the rockers. But I would be open to trying other rockers. But here's the thing, and this this is what I go through most often, is people want to discuss things that are very, very small esoteric things. And they're not looking at all of the other things on their combination. Like almost nobody here is building a 9,500 RPM cup motor or a Australian touring motor or a Formula One motor or a pro stock motor or a stock eliminator motor or any of those things where we are looking for the last little thing. So talking about doing it with rocker ratio versus doing it with camshafts, it's like all things that we can discuss. But the reality is that not, if you're going to put a low buck truck camshaft in your thing anyway, why are we even having this conversation? It's just, like I said, it's just weird esoteric stuff. My 99 454 Gen 6 has the fatter 5/8 push rods. Did you put 5/8 push rods in it? Because it didn't come with those. GM recall in the 6.2 sounds like a Band-Aid fix changing to a thicker oil. I don't know anything about that. I don't have a background on that. I don't know what the situation is. I don't know how big the situation is. I don't know. I don't know how thicker oil is going to, if it's a problem with a pump or the oiling system. Thicker oil sounds like something that I would do on my truck because it has 350,000 miles on it. It doesn't sound like something that the OEM should do. I think the argument here is there's always some deflection, but at some point you have a push rod that's adding weight to your drivetrain. I agree with that. Like I said, I think you have to think about that. I mean, if you're adding a bunch of weight, I don't think that that's good. But if you have deflection, I also don't think that that's good. Let's see. The original 97 454 used 5/16. Yep. The original engine found 5 bent push rods. If you found bent push rods in there, you didn't find it because they were 5/16. You found it because you had some sort of physical interference. The push rods don't bend especially with those stock valve springs. That's not going to be an issue. Richard, have you ever used a set of Miller mid-lift rocker arms, great rockers? I don't know what that is. I'm not familiar with that term. Definitely runs cooler without the hood, not to mention got a big Coleman pit dirt bike. It's hilarious. I did the 7.4 080 wall BTRs. They're solid. Yeah, I don't think you're going to run into that issue. I mean, like I said, it's this 95% rule where a lot of guys are running stock push rods in their LS turbo motors. Rusty Gold beverage. I made a short video without the exhaust on. You can see the valves kissing the flames. Yeah, that's cool. Who has done really good videos on that is it's not Steve Morris, although he may have. Who are the other guys that have run the motors at wide open throttle on a dyno pull with no exhaust on? Oh no, you're going to bend all your valves. No, you're not going to. That's not what happens. But it is really cool because you can see the fire coming out and you can see the valve opening and closing and stuff. It's really cool stuff. Big block Chevy. I'm scrolling. Big block Chevy is hard on push rods, Richard, with the canna valve heads, Pontiac V8 and Ellis straight, 45-degree lifter bank angles. Yeah, all of that's well and good, but I've run 20 of those. I'm sure 20 of those junkyard Gen 6 motors, and the push rod thing is not an issue. They didn't, like I said, they didn't bend because, I mean, maybe the guy over revved it. Maybe he revved it to 7,000 or 8,000 RPM. Maybe he missed a shift or whatever, or did a neutral drop or whatever. But they didn't do that because, like, that Gen 6 motor is like a 5,000 RPM motor. And push rods don't come into play there. They issued a formal recall on 6.2s. Oh, we need to have a poll. So, in fact, I want to talk about that. Would you buy a GM truck with an LT motor over a Okay, here we go. Would you buy a GM truck with an LT motor, hashtag recall, over a new Hemi? So if you're going to buy a new truck, would you get one of the LT direct injected motors, or would you get a Hemi? Because not that I'm in the market for a new truck, but if I was, would I pick that? I like the way that they look. I love the way the GM trucks look, but I wouldn't buy one right now, not with knowing what I know about the problems. Yeah, Moran. It might be Moran. That's right, DNR. I want tool steel push rods. Solid ones, right? Solid 5/16 is the way to go. If you want information on it, look up Rainman Rays repairs. 96 to 97 used 5/16, known to bend 98 to 2000 used 3/8. I don't remember seeing any difference in those, and I don't remember having any bent push rods ever. Building 85 turbo Buick 3.8 liter, worth it to convert to roller cam and rockers from flat tap bit. Well, as always, we have to start at the beginning. How much power do you want to make? And how much RPM are you wanting to run? High ratio rockers add a bunch of bending stress to the push rods, but you get extra lift. I want tool steel push rods. I saw something R slap themselves on a mini bike. It was funny. That is good. Turbo 5.3, 78, 75, 323 gears, 31-inch tire, 3,300 pounds. So you think a low vacuum one for wind and boost. Ben, what is your question? Wouldn't you try to be that absolute fastest low buck trucker, making compromise to be streetable and on all we can get? Well, that's the thing. The question wouldn't be for me. The question would be for you. What is it you want? What are you trying to do? Like, I'm building a 1 liter sprint motor, so that's not a thing. Although I have been thinking, oh, man, this is what happens, guys. And you guys know this. You guys know this to be true. I was talking to Jimmy, and Jimmy is doing a twin turbo exhaust manifold for an RB26 for a Skyline, which is awesome. The problem with that is now he has me wanting a Skyline. He's not. I don't think his is. I don't remember if his is a Skyline or not. It might be in another chassis. Maybe it is a Skyline. But so he built a dedicated exhaust manifold for this setup. We might offer it. I don't know. We'll see. He does a really good job. He did all the stuff for HP Performance. He's really good. But then I got to talking to Jimmy, to the guy that has this. He's like, yeah, Richard should get a Skyline. I'm like, man, why are you saying that? He goes, yeah, we'll import one for you. I'm like, dude, I really want a Skyline. And then we were talking about the R34s versus R33s versus R32s. And then I got to go do a deep dive and look up all the stuff and figure out how much power they make and where I can go. Because I have an RB25. And he's like, well, you don't need to get an all-wheel drive, RB a 26. He goes, you could just get I think it's a GTT or something. It's a 2-wheel drive version that had the RB25 in it. Because you could just build your spare motor and then put it in. And it's 2-wheel drive. And I'm thinking, this is perfect. This is like it was meant to be. I can have all the looks of the, of the Skyline that I want, which I think are amazing. And then have a spare motor, build it up. It's got to make 500 or 600 horsepower, right? Because that's fairly easy. That's a turbo motor. It's really easy to do. And it's 2-wheel drive. I don't have to worry about 4-wheel drive dynos. But it's not an RB26. It's not a twin turbo deal. I'm not going to get, because I don't even have Skyline money, which is why I'm not doing it anyways. But I certainly don't have R34 money, because the Fast and the Furious still killed that market. But a 33 maybe, and a 32 is but a 33 I'm thinking, yeah, probably. But what would I get, and when I build up the it's just all this. This is what happens. He says, oh, yeah, you should get one of these. And I'm thinking, well, how much are they? And he tells me some number, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound like me. would have to sell a lot more cams and stuff. Maybe I need to do a GoFundMe thing for. I've always wanted an RB motor. You know, I've always wanted an RB Skyline or Fast and Furious Skyline. Everybody GoFundMe, but I wouldn't do that. My LS4 will get a set of stock rockers, the BTR trunnion bushing upgrade. My worry is needing different push rods after DoD delete, installing my Elgin sloppy 1.5. I think stock push rods. As long as that sloppy stage 1.5 is the same base circle as stock, you can use stock push rods. And you even have some leeway with cams, because depending on where you are now with where you are on the adjustability between half and 1.5 turns, you have leeway both of those directions. Like if you're right in the middle, you have an equal amount of push rod adjustability there either way. Original 454 ran hard. Yeah, we ran a bunch of stuff with 5/16 push rods. Oh, here we go. Here we go on the Skylines. Here we go. And then here's the problem with the Skyline. I'm like, man, stock, those things are not making very much power. That's like, we're talking like it's like a 300 horsepower motor, and which I think that they're amazing. But 300 horsepower is not really very much. Hopefully I order a set of rods and pistons for a D16, L78 throwing rods. The other thing that I want to talk about before I got off on the Skyline thing is the 1 liter sprint motor. I'm thinking like, you know, hoops and, you know, CA624 rods or head studs, and reaching out and having somebody port the head and making the most badass, like kind of 1 liter deal and a compound turbo setup, and thinking, well, I wonder how much we could make. Could we make 400 from it? I don't know. L78 is throwing rods. That's not good. Hemi GM was a true nightmare. I'd pick a Hemi. I think right now I'd pick the Hemi truck over a GM. I would rather pick the GM truck. I like the way that they look. I drove Brian's, like the Hellcat version of the truck, whatever that was. It's really impressive. I wouldn't get something like that, but I don't think I would get an LT based deal. I just don't think I would trust it. I would buy a 4853. Again, I feel exactly the same way. If they had an LS truck, I would get that. Do you want crank failure or camshaft failure? I'm guessing I'm getting a Coyote. If it was a petrol V8, the 5.7 Hemi is decent, but why look past the Cummins? I don't want a diesel engine. GM has faulty line bore machine work on the 6.2. I'm going to be voiding the warranty anyway. The diesel does everything the V8 does, but with better fuel economy. It doesn't really do that. A turbo diesel doesn't accelerate like a gas engine does. Well, a reason for thicker push rods if you're getting spring frequency wear issues. Honestly, a stiffer push rod and slightly different spring seat open makes weird changes in the harmonics. I have a 2004 LS Shorty and 2007 double CAD. Really wanted a new one. Look up TSV Motorsports video. GM used to be known for excellent block line bores. New to the world of bikes and minis, Skyline engines belong in anything but a Skyline. We should Skyline, like RB26, swap the world. Is that what you're saying? Shadow LS57. The thing is, I have a the cool thing, the other thing to mention is I have an RB25 that's all stock right now, but I also have the bell housing to attach a T56 to it. So even though if I got not an R34 and got an R33, it would come with a 5-speed. I could put a T56 in. I don't know that I would need to do that anyway, but single turbo is proven better for an RB26, but if you like twins, that's your car. I want an R32. What power increase have you seen just from a roller rocker setup on an LS? I have a rocker setup on an LS. I have a video up on that. I think it was 10 or 15 or something. My RB25 didn't even break 300. Adrian, that's what I was doing. I did the deep dive. I went and looked up to try to. And what are you doing, huh? Come here. Come here. Hello, handsome. Hello. Okay. I know you got to get my arm. Huh? You got to get my arm. Okay, soft jaw. Remember, you're a golden retriever. Hello. So nice. Broke in my face. Yep, that's golden retriever stuff. What are you doing? What are you doing? Did you just want to be on camera? Is that it? Okay, go get your brother. I was looking at all the, because that's what I do. And whenever I look at anything, I look at the dyno results. I'm like, oh yeah, 1,000 horsepower RB26 or 1,200 horsepower RB26. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to see that. That's a dedicated build where somebody put forged rods, forged pistons, probably forged crank, fully ported heads, cams, ran it to 10,000 RPM, put a huge turbo on it. That's not indicative of what normal guys would do. You can turn off the front wheel drive on an R32 GTS-T Type M, build the RB20. I like as soon as I saw that they had an RB20, I'm like, oh, I really like that. A 6-cylinder, 2-liter, it's fantastic. Because we have 6 cylinders, we don't need as much head flow. It should be awesome for a 2-liter. 5.3 board to 5.7, that's good. 292 horsepower with a Pro Tune and like 9 PSI. Okay. Late LT truck engines, rod issues, rod integrity. Friend has a speed lube, brakes his truck. I thought about building a 5.3 board to 6.0 since I've got piston sitting here. It'll go in my Go Fast budget S10 build, running and driving for 2,000, then boost later. Okay. We had a Skyline from when they were new. That's awesome. What year is it? That's an R34, like 550 horsepower out of the 85 turbo 3.8 and rode to 5,500. I don't think you need to go with the roller cam and rockers for that. 5,500 is easy flat tap and stuff. Just go to Japan and buy a rusty one. You must think that I'm different than I am. Near. Big block Chevy Mark IV used 3/8 push rods, all except the 366 and 427 tall deck. They had 5/16 meant for low RPM. I thought that I thought like the L72 and the L88 and the LS6, I thought that those had 7/16 push rods. How big a wet shot can a stock 5-liter take? Your issue is not with how much it will ingest. I mean, it is, because if it's a stock 5-liter, you're talking about a 250 horsepower motor. So you're going to want to run half of that. You sound like my 14-year-old dad. Build me a Skyline, $145,000 later. Yeah, that's not it. 300 horsepower was good in the 80s. Yeah, I look at I had an NSX and I loved it. And now Jimmy has one. His is making like, I don't know, 750 at the tire or something like that. So if I got a Skyline, I'm thinking, okay, great. I got to be able to beat Jimmy's NSX because that's not going to happen. Figure they're heavier, but yeah, it makes sense. It's an easy fix for a 366 and a tall deck. An RB sounds amazing. They really did. I watched Car Wow where they ran an RB30 or an R32, a 33, a 34, and then the modern version of the GTR, and obviously the modern version just it's 600 horsepower or whatever, just destroys the other ones. But they were all running like 14s in the quarter. I don't know if those guys are not drivers or whatever, but RB26 bottom end can take 700 horsepower with a single GTX 35 or 84 RS. That's what I would put on it, certainly. Would you recommend trunnion rocker upgrades for 750 wheel horsepower on a 6-liter? Definitely doing valve springs. I wouldn't worry about rocker upgrades. Bought a low buck truck cam recently. Haven't put it in yet, but my only complaint is no stickers in the box. Everyone knows stickers add 10 horsepower. We don't even have stickers because that's how low buck we are, but we're working on it because now we have a logo so we can have stickers made. Said day neither on the new truck GM 62 versus Hemi and the Ford, even worse with their 10-speed autos being so problematic. Maybe a Tacoma. Yeah, really. i3 LS Trailblazer SS intake cam with flat tops exhaust. That's a good combination. Love an RB20 with a PT 5858, 6MT, something fierce. That would be good. I like those. I like the early Supers that had that. My GSP does it, the twofers on the arm as well. Yeah, they and more Brady than Bruno. That's Brady. He comes up and will grab your arm. That's his love language. That's how he shows you that he's happy that you're home and all that. Bruno brings us gifts, like he brings us one of his babas, one of his toys. And now he's gotten to they have a blanket on their bed. It's actually Brady's bed. Bruno never sleeps there. Bruno sleeps up with Lisa. Or now, because it's getting hot, now he sleeps in the bathtub. But he'll grab the blanket and just walk around with it. I did a Instagram post on it, and he'll even bring it outside. I'm like, what are you bring it out for the squirrels, or what are you doing? We're gonna produce engine masterish episodes for us who need them. Saw you in some of them. Yeah, I don't have engine master like budget, but all of the testing that I've done is like that over the last 30 years. RB25 S13 couldn't beat a Cobb Stage 2 in a drag race, maybe on the top end, but it made me sad. 2JZ BMW, Bear or Vortec 4200 are expensive and unreliable. The problem is that you compare those to, I mean, really any V8. Gas versus diesel, I think of horsepower as the ability to accelerate and torque as the ability to maintain RPM. I think it's the reverse of that. RB20 is still not great for power unless you spin it to 9,000. Well, no, it depends on what you're comparing it to. So I compare it to another 2-liter. So if you have another 2-liter motor and you have that's a 4-cylinder and you have a 2-liter that's a 6-cylinder, even I don't know what that head flow is like. I haven't done enough head flow testing on RB series to know what they flow. But even if it flowed less, we have 6 of them. So it needs to make a certain amount of power multiplied by 6 instead of multiplied by 4. So a 4-cylinder 2-liter has to make more power per cylinder than a 6-cylinder does, and so it needs to have more airflow. Luckily, a 2-liter are like a K series has lots of head flow. I'm sure a K series head flows a lot more than RB does. 30 psi will wake up. An RB20, yeah. I don't want either of those things. It's an 01 Z71 for me until the wheels fall off. Yeah, mine's a 2002, so give me a Hemi. Shadow, I'll likely be rebuilding a 4L60. One in British Columbia, just imported 55,000. Yeah, that's not me. I really like the LT1 Trans Am. Put your RB in a 240. Yeah, that would be a good choice. No name. Any year for what? I'd rather a 5-liter and new phasers than either LT or Hemi, but then there's the transmission as well. Sad times for the powertrains. Lobo truck cam. Lettuce, bacon, tomato. There you go. 7/16 and big block Gen 4 and my 99 Gen 454. Just blew up a 351. Went through the trap at 7,200. Best ET 1010. Would you like it to have been a 999? Scat said 7,000 RPM limit. The main web on 3 completely destroyed. Time for dart forge crank. Okay, I don't. Are you sure it's not detonation? We had a famous R33 that was featured in Turbo Magazine back in the day. Nice. My GSP does a toy as well. Yeah, that's pretty common. The dogs bring you something to show that they're happy that you're home, and then they want to like walk up to you, and then they turn around and go away. They're not giving it to you. They're like, "Hey, I got this. I'm so excited that you're home. I'm not handing this to you. I mean, we could play fetch with it or whatever." How many wastegates do you recommend for a 6-liter with a GTX turbo? Is a comp 459 a good option? No on the comp cam. I mean, it's good for an NA 6-liter, but it's not what I would choose for a turbo option, and certainly not for use with that turbo on a 6-liter. Because a 6-liter with that turbo, you should be wanting low speed power. Golden Retriever does the paw on the arm or leg. Sure, loyalty. Yeah, that's pretty normal. Quad 4 V8. We were the first tuners. I remember twin turbo super wagon in 84. I tuned in 86. Comparing an RB20 to an RB25, it makes more sense to compare it to a 4G63, but it's really only competition is its bigger brothers. No, an RB20 would be a comparison for me because I compare stuff for Bonneville to another 2-liter. I have a spare 4L60. Are the valve vents of your low buck truck the same as a truck Norris? Just how close are those two cams? They're very comparable in terms of the power curves. Episode 30 to 40 minutes with guests to discuss and demonstrate laptop tuning, fuel injection, turbo, procharger, nitrous. You would rule YouTube. There are a lot of really good tuners that do videos on tuning. I'm not the guy to listen to about that because all I do is wide open throttle tuning. So that's not something that you would want. I could tell you that in 5 minutes. And I do tell you that in the videos. Guest star Brule. Brule would not be the guy that you would have tune laptop tune stuff. He would definitely be the guy that you want to tune carbureted stuff. Use a wideband O2 sensor for each pass. Show even a smidge rich 950 Holly HP, or I got lucky. I had a bad block. Yeah, I just don't know that. I just haven't seen problems with cranks breaking, even at 50, even at twice the power that you're talking about. Like we have cast LS cranks that went to 1500 horsepower, and cast other kinds of cranks that went more than 1,000 horsepower. So I don't know that I've never seen anybody break a crank based on power, and even 7,200 just doesn't seem like a lot to me. I'm not saying that that's not it. It could be it, but it's just like I said, judging by what we've done in the past, it just seems odd. Would you buy a GM truck with an LT motor over a new Hemi? 54% still doing the GM stuff. Interesting. Low buck truck cam, truck Norris literally have the same specs. Besides, we don't know what the last number of exhaust ratios, but I guess that they are the same. The thing that I'm interested in for any of these camshafts is the power curve. I'm not interested in the specs, actually. That's why I test all of them. And that's why when I get in arguments with people that are camshaft people, oh, you need a rec port cam, you need a turbo cam, you need a blower cam, you need a cam that's specific for that 5.3. Oh, really? I do. Explain that to me. I want to go on I want to go on somebody's thing so bad. Maybe like Cooper Baghetti or one of those guys. I want to go on I want to go on an interview with a camshaft guru and educate them. I want to let you know I got to the race, 18-wheeler with a van, lost 749 to 753. The van pulled up the front tires, fuel trim was better, 12.2. Did you reduce the amount of nitrous that you're running, drag van? First of all, that's awesome. You got out there and you're making it happen and you got to race. Now you helped us with a crank decision. Duramax is decent, but need to be a diesel mechanic like me to keep them going. What's power curve difference overlay of a truck North and the Lowbuck truck cam? They're almost identical, just like they are with a if you take a look at the Chopacabra cam, it's very, very comparable and stuff. Nobody from behind the wheel would be able to tell what cam that is. Nobody would. Because you even if there was a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 horsepower difference, you wouldn't be able to tell that from behind the wheel. Nobody would be able to feel that. Because you would have more of a difference from one run to another run than you would have between those camshafts. Ran the bottle pressure at 1100, that should be good. You did a 250 shot. Okay, did you do it like you were talking about? Did you delay it at the period of time that you're talking about? I was watching Fluid Motor Union video today. I'm not familiar with that. You mentioned your video on the power cones. Yeah, I call it a power cone because it sounds cool because it's, power, but we're just putting a bigger exhaust on a turbo, and that's not really, that shouldn't at all be. That shouldn't be new information. 54% says easier to LS swap an LT GM truck when it blows up. 8% on the hit and all in a half second. Okay, what is that? What is the best thing that thing has run? I'm fine talking to most people about cam specs. It's like talking a different language. It is, but here's what people do, and this is why I like spinning them around. They don't like that because they know that what I'm saying is accurate. People want to talk about, and I get this, I understand. They want to talk about, okay, like I get people asking me, okay, on a 5.3, okay, here are the specs on a 5.3. I tell them it has this head, it has this intake manifold, it has this compression, as whatever. Okay, what cam would you put in it? What's the very best cam? What's the optimum cam to put in there? They don't even have to tell me what it is. I'm just sitting there waiting. Okay, what's the best cam? Well, this is the one. This custom cam would be the best cam that you put in there. I tell them that they're wrong. I said, look, you don't even have to tell me what your specs are. And I can tell you that you're wrong. Or you can't do that. No, I can. I can absolutely can. What if the guy that you were selling that to, the best cam ever made, your best cam that's ever made for a 5.3, what if the guy wanted to use a stock converter? I'm not going to be able to use a stock converter with your cam. I can guarantee it. Well, that doesn't matter. I said, no, it absolutely matters. That's the thing that you're not understanding. And so I can go through all of that stuff with them. And it really, like I said, it really it frustrates people. But that's the reality, and that's the thing. My 90s Falcon has a problem with a thing called smart lock, and it basically thinks the car is being stolen, so it takes a 10-round boxing match, and then it'll let you start. Uh-oh. 779 at 88 today. It was 753 at 91. That's good. That's better. That's awesome. LS swap and a Saturn Sky. He does a lot of high-end exhaust work. Would ported L3 heads hurt lower RPM power for a light F body? Is it worth any power on a max hour at 6.2? Ported LS3 heads can support, I don't know, we've made 700 plus with ported LS3 heads. So they were not what I would pick if I was making 500 horsepower, because there's no reason to port them. Because stock heads will already support way more than that. LS3's OG62. The thing that upsets me about the truck situation for the LT stuff is that they're really good motors. I mean, in terms of power output, they're really good motors, and there's a lot of potential. But if they have other inherent problems, then if I'm getting a new truck, which I'm not getting a new truck, but if I were, I would want to run flawlessly forever like this 5.3 does. I would expect that going in, and if it doesn't do that, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. Not in the slightest. I have been keeping notes on my running so that I can, get back in shape, be young, could be in my 20s again. That's probably not going to work. I've had so many good conversations with one of TDI swap an RX-8. TDI stuff I like. That's what I love about Eric from Westech, is that he was a TDI guy. So I was doing the Civic VX and also the Sprint Turbo. So we were doing fuel mileage stuff. We weren't caring about who's making more power or whatever. We're like, okay, what kind of mileage did you get? And it was awesome, because TDI stuff is like serious stuff, man. What's the most important advice you give a newbie Windsor builder besides wastebasket for the stock heads? Unfortunately, for a Windsor, you got to change everything. So the heads you do need an airflow research set of heads or whatever, trick flow heads. But you also have to change everything else. The intake manifold's not good. It's limiting. The camshaft's not good. It's limiting, especially on a truck. The 5-liter Mustang one's better, but there's so many better ones. But you got to change all that. You got to change the whole top end. Boosted with shock when it took off. Fans at the track love the race. If you buy a 6.2 LT, want to get it cheap, tear it down to the bare block, send it to the machine shop for full inspection and corrected blueprint. Yeah, I'm not going to do that if I buy a truck. I'm not going to take the motor out of it. I'd love a 50 mile per gallon highway RX-8. Yeah, and the cool thing is I remember riding in one of Eric's, I think he had a Jetta TDI, and he had done all the stuff like, manipulating the different sensors and all kinds of things. And I'm like, man, this thing, and he had extra fuel put in it and boost and stuff. I'm like, this is really pretty cool. This is awesome. I mean, it's not an 800 horsepower supercharged Hemi or whatever, but it's a lot cooler than like a stock one. And I can tell you that I was way more excited, like with the VX and with the Sprint, getting 50 miles per gallon when I was driving in the Sprint from Vegas out to Westech and back. And then in the Civic VX, getting more than 50 miles per gallon driving from Northern California, Southern California and back. I loved pulling up to the gas pump and putting 4 or 5 gallons in, because it was like, it was like 250 miles or whatever from where I was starting to where I was stopping at this Love's truck stop, because that was the cheapest gas. So I loved watching people spend $100 worth of gas, and I'm spending pennies. It was awesome. Opinion of a Windsor stud girdle. I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't do anything on a 302, because I might put it on a 7200 351, but it's not going to stop the block from splitting on a 302, because it doesn't split down in that direction. I want a pair of RX-8s to just continue to swap endless engines. There you go. A Jetta TDI average low 40s. We do a lot of stop and go driving. Yeah, and Eric drove like I did on the freeway. Do you see the guy that built the VW powered car that made 100 miles per gallon? I haven't seen that. I love my 06 Jetta with a tune and straight pipe. Miss it every day. Yeah, you do the things that you want to do for the things that you're trying to achieve. I mean, when I was driving from here to West Tech, I'm just driving from here to West Tech. I'm not racing anybody along the way. I'm just driving and cruising and made sure that the AC worked. I was hoping, and like on the Civic VX and on the Sprint too, that like I would have liked cruise control. That'd have been awesome. But neither one of those had that, but that's okay. I wasn't making cruise control money. Just making. Can I use this in my 2001 SS Camaro 6-liter? Yes, you can. 2015. Yeah, if it's a 6-liter, that's fine. Like 6-liter LS is fine. Any LS based motor is fine. I missed the fuel mileage, volume modifications. I've been studying what need, experience, opinions. I just would make sure that you have the proper oiling. So a really, really like a dry sump for maybe the RPM the range that you're running is a consideration. At least a really good pan and pump and windage tray and baffles and stuff. 0 to 60, of course, not too speedy yet. Cam sensor on a 2015 6-liter. The cam sensor or the crank sensors. The crank sensor is in the back. The crank sensor is the same spot on all LS motors. You have a different sensor on later ones. That's going to be a 58X, and so it's going to have a different trigger wheel on the back of the crank and also a different sensor plugged into the same spot on the block. The difference I think that you're talking about is the sensor that's in the back of the crankshaft is actually a cam sensor, and a 2015 6-liter won't have that. Hot rodders waste gas at 50 miles per gallon. I didn't. I tried to get good fuel mileage while I was driving. I wasn't racing or people around in the Sprint Turbo, even though it went 120 miles an hour, so it's pretty fast. On that note, I will see you guys all later. Be safe out there on Saturday, and we'll see you all on Sunday.